alone on a planet, no hope of survival. But you're also not sitting next to Phil anymore in that cubicle, so...
Dude, that actually made it into a Metroid game. I'll stop when you die!
Enough.
Enough.
Are you enjoying this?
Yes! I want you dead, you fucking freak!
If you could stop, that'd be great.
How does it feel to have lived long enough to see all of your favorite franchises go down in flames?
Feels great.
I don't even know where to begin with this review. I feel like I've used that Red Letter Media clip several times over the past 5 years. Every single franchise I grew up with is dead or doesn't even vaguely resemble what it used to be 20 years ago. I think all of the early reviewers already covered every single problem with Metroid Prime 4, and although I'm still going to take a crack at it myself, I almost don't see the point. For once, people are on my side. It's obvious that Metroid Prime 4 Beyond is a massive disappointment. Well, it's a disappointment if you actually had expectations. From the moment I saw the giant empty desert in one of the trailers, I knew it was over. I think it's become obvious to anyone paying attention that Nintendo has been slowly turning all of its other franchises into Breath of the Wild for some reason. I suppose that reason being that Breath of the Wild sold way better than any other Zelda game, so clearly it's the giant empty open world that was the reason for its success, and not that it actually had surprisingly good open world design. But of course, that is not the only problem with Prime 4, there's a lot of other ones. The most obvious being Miles McKenzie, Mr. Goldstein himself, one of the most annoying video game companions in history. In a fucking Metroid game of all things. You know, the franchise known for its isolation in hostile alien environments? Yeah, you get a chatty tutorial companion who tells you exactly what to do constantly, will solve puzzles for you if you don't do it yourself in less than 10 seconds. Oh, and if you thought to yourself, maybe this is just for the tutorial. No, roughly a quarter of this game is spent escorting around a bunch of cringy self-insert characters who constantly chat about nothing in the background, who of course do Marvel quips and even tell jokes in a Metroid game. Hey, wait a minute, this all sounds familiar. Didn't I play a game like this 3 years ago, and yet everyone praised it as a masterpiece? That was also from a formerly beloved franchise that's tone and atmosphere was completely destroyed. What game was that? It's on the tip of my tongue. Oh yeah, God of War. And yet everyone loved God of War Ragnarok. Weird. Now, of course, if there's any midwits lurking, I'm sure they're going to say something like, well, Metroid and God of War are completely different. Yeah, well, actually, I would argue what happened to God of War is worse than what happened to Metroid, truly. A franchise that used to be about white male rage, getting revenge, ripping people limb from limb. It was a pure power fantasy game. And then somehow the franchise morphed into being about a beta male soy boy cuckold millennial with troll's remorse, who fails to raise his son, and went from banging every young babe in Sparta at the same time to settling for a post-wall roasty hoe. Kratos has to be the poster child for the guy who peaked in high school and then became a fat slob as he got older. But this is a video about Metroid, not God of War. The point is, the difference in reception between God of War Ragnarok and Metroid Prime 4 is for one simple reason. Metroid was never a very popular franchise. Now, you might get the perception otherwise because most of the games in this series are critically acclaimed. A lot of YouTubers have talked about their love for Metroid over the years. But in reality, the sales of this franchise have never been that good. So now that Retro Studios completely ruined the series for its core fan base, they effectively made a game for no one. You could argue they were trying to appeal to the West, or to the lowest common denominator with this. But I guess fortunately for people like us, everyone has decided they hate the Switch too. So normies didn't buy one, which just leaves the core Nintendo fanboy user base. And other than the blatant shills, which are continuously embarrassing themselves right now, the real Metroid fans fucking hate this game, for good reason. Now, you can certainly blame Nintendo for canceling the Namco Bandai original Prime 4, which who knows, it might have been complete shit. We'll never really know. But it's clear to me that giving the job to Retro was the worst possible fucking thing they could have done. Because the last time they made a good game was Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, and that was, what, over a decade ago? If you've learned nothing from all the reviews I've made on my channel and your own experiences, I would hope, it's clear that any studio that was good 10 or 15 years ago has gone to complete shit because they lost all of the talent. None of the same fucking people work there. I think another obvious thing that explains why this game is so mediocre is the fact that X343 devs worked on this. Yeah, you know, the people who ruined Halo. Oh, I know what we should do with those employees. Let's hire them at Retro Studios so they can fuck up Metroid 2. Makes sense to me. You can blame the horrific millennial character writing and the nearly non-existent story on a few contracted writers. Now, one of those writers, Megan Fausti, who wrote the narrative for this game, said back in 2015 that she believes Samus is trans. Why do I get the feeling not a single other review for Prime 4 is going to mention this? I'm sure it's just a coincidence why the writing in this game is so bad. Of course, she's not the only one. One of the other contract writers, Tracy Nicoletti, wrote for fucking Thomas the Tank Engine. Yeah, these are some real accolades over here. Now, of course, someone who's played Metroid games might ask themselves, why the hell does Metroid even need multiple writers to begin with? Especially when the story of this game sucks ass. There's barely even a story to begin with. Basically, Samus and a handful of Galactic Federation troops just get teleported to another planet while they're fighting the space pirates, and the lore of the new extinct race, the Lamorn, is just a basic bitch climate change allegory. Legitimately, they didn't even have a villain. They just harvested green energy, yes, it's really called that, from a volcano, and that destroyed the environment. And Samus is supposed to be their chosen one, their savior, when Samus has already been the chosen one for like 3 other species at this point. And their race is already extinct. I feel like this is just a mishmash of the Chozo and the Luminoth from previous Prime games. And the cast of characters in the game is about as terrible as you'd expect. You get the nerdy engineer who doesn't belong on the battlefield, the stoic sniper, the tough black guy, the token woman who is also a huge fangirl for Samus, of course, and the Reddit robot, aka the Groot of the group. So basically just the cast of a generic B action sci-fi movie from the 90s. Oh, and for all 5 of you Sylux fans out there, if you're really excited for his triumphant return to wrap up the loose end from the secret ending of Prime 3, yeah, he has about 5 minutes of screen time, and he has absolutely nothing to do with the climate change plot. Oh, and if you want to hear about his backstory, why he hates Samus, you better go for 100% completion. I'm not joking, dude. It's that bad. But enough about the story, what about the gameplay? Does it at least live up to the previous Prime games? Well, if you're just looking at this footage, it may appear to be incredibly similar to the original trilogy, and in truth, it is. But trust me when I say the huge problems are glaringly obvious. It almost doesn't even feel worth the time to really go into them in detail, the level design being the thing that suffered the most by far here. Between the giant empty desert that only has 10 locations in it, yes, 10. The rest is just an empty, like, generic PS2 looking desert. Probably looks worse than Jak 3's desert from 20 fucking years ago. And of course, there's shrines in this desert. And yes, they're literally called shrines, like Zelda, but there's only 6 of them. And the other 4 locations are just piles of Galactic Federation debris that were teleported with you to this planet, which is mainly used for an endgame fetch quest. I think anyone watching footage of this game can obviously tell that the desert is by far the laziest part. They didn't even try here. This is the worst sandbox I think I've ever seen in any modern video game. That's not even hyperbole, dude. And so you might be thinking, okay, the desert is like a glorified loading screen, except the game still has loading screens, so it's not. Maybe at the very least, the Metroid exploration areas of this game are good, right? Well, that brings me to the next major problem with this game's level design, the linearity. This is a Metroid game where not only is the world not interconnected, unless you want to play semantics games and pretend the giant empty desert is the same thing as the labyrinthine design of Super Metroid or Metroid Prime 1 or 2. It's not. That's just a straight up fucking lie. No, these are dungeons, linear ass Zelda dungeons. Actually, probably more linear than most Zelda dungeons. The Vault Forge is literally just 3 towers filled with elevators that are glorified loading screens and hallways. That's the entire map, and you have to basically do that twice, and then the 3rd tower is a fucking racetrack motorcycle tutorial. The snow area is an underground laboratory that is just a bunch of hallways and rooms. And the mines at the end of the game, which are just a clear ripoff of the Phazon mines from the first game, is probably the most linear area in the entire game. There's even one time in this game where the level of linearity actually becomes insulting. When you first complete the Vault Forge and acquire your motorcycle, which still feels incredibly out of place. This extinct alien race of tentacle creatures just rode a bunch of fucking motorcycles around. What is this, Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds? But right after this, Miles calls you and says you can go wherever you want.
Congratulations.
Who asked you,
There's
bitch?
3 keys left. Up to you to decide which one to go after first.
Well, that was a fucking lie. As it turns out, not only can you not access the mines, you can't get inside most of the shrines, you can't grab any of the optional items at the Galactic Federation debris areas, and if you try to go to the snow area, you're stopped by a solid wall of ice that you need the plasma beam to get through. And so, you need to drive all the way to the other end of the map to go to the volcano and grab the fire chip. Oh, and guess what? You can't proceed any further in this area either until you have a completely different set of abilities. So you have to go all the way back to Miles because only he can give you the plasma beam. No, you can't just upgrade your own fucking suit, which means you have to backtrack out of the dungeon, drive across the desert, watch 3 fucking loading screens like this is Starfield to load back into the home base so that he can put the fucking beam chip in your arm, and then you have to watch 3 cutscenes again, and then you gotta drive all the way back to the snow area, and finally you can play the game after like a 20 to 30 minute detour. And you just know there's going to be morons who are going to play semantics games and say, well, actually, in Prime 1, this part was linear. It's like, yeah, that was one little part that also had doors that connected to other zones, like the Space Pirate base in Phendrana. Yeah, you could say that one tiny part is very linear. But later in the game, it connects to other parts of Phendrana, which again adds to that sense of exploration. The very first major area in the game, the Chozo Ruins, has 3 different separate pathways from the opening area, which yes, I know you can't explore in every area, like you need the missile to get into one zone, then you need the morph ball to get into another zone, you need a morph ball bomb to get to somewhere else, so on and so forth. But at the very least, it still felt like you were exploring around, and there were so many secrets in like every single room. Because Prime 1 is essentially one massive interconnected world with multiple elevators that take you to different parts of each map, even though there are multiple mandatory backtracking sections in the Phazon mines that require you to cross the whole map, if you were creative with your backtracking, you could simultaneously minimize the actual distance you needed to travel while also grabbing a bunch of upgrades with your newly unlocked abilities. Then playing Prime 4, there are these robots that you can electrify, and they give you the location of all of the upgrades in that area. I don't think I need to elaborate on this too much further. It's obviously much more painful if you're just walking back through a linear dungeon, slowly grabbing all of the upgrades when you already know where they are, and it usually is incredibly simple to grab them. They're not even real puzzles. You just scan something in the environment, it tells you need to use super missiles or a power bomb or something, and then you grab the item and you keep walking. It just feels like padding and not the least bit necessary to complete the game, and even just completing it for completionist's sake feels like such a waste of time, probably because the game isn't that good to begin with. Oh, and I haven't even talked about the end game fetch quest. Yes, I'm well aware the Prime series is famous for having an artifact hunt of sorts at the end of every game where you have to backtrack through the whole map. And the thing is, as much as people don't like this, at least it made sense in the old games. This was your opportunity to go pick up all of the upgrades that you couldn't get before, now that you have all of the abilities, right? And in the case of Prime 1, you could find the optional elemental super missiles, and while 2 out of 3 are questionably useful, the ice super missile is really fucking good against the final boss. But in Prime 4, this has to be the worst, most obvious padding version of this in the series. You have to collect green crystals that are just scattered around the empty desert. And dude, I knew going into this game that I needed to farm crystals to beat it, because every reviewer already talked about this basically, right? And even still, crashing into every single crystal I saw until the end game, I only had 60% of the total I needed. So I had to waste another 10 fucking minutes after I'd collected everything else, including mech parts. You get to build a giant mech, and guess what the mech does? It shoots a big laser and then it blows up. The mech doesn't like fight a giant griever or some big dragon thing, or you know, maybe a Metroid. Alright, I'm gonna stop myself from going on another tangent. All you need to know is the world design is probably the worst in the entire series. I'd say bar none, really. Maybe Other M has worse level design, but I'm not gonna play it again to find out. Moving on to the combat. Now, even though I'm not going to really cover the basics of combat too much, I do want to address some of the more annoying elements. The first obvious one is that the enemies just have too much health. Even though there's probably fewer combat encounters than the previous games, it doesn't matter because each individual enemy probably has twice as much health. And I think the reason they did this is because most of the enemies in the game seem to have some kind of elemental weakness. Like, grievers are weak to ice, the robots are weak to electricity, and there's maybe 2 or 3 enemies weak to fire, but that's it. The plasma beam was heavily nerfed from the first game. The only unique combat ability in the game is a remote control psychic blast that you get very early on, and it's not even very useful in combat. It's just a gimmick used for certain bosses and for solving puzzles, which is basically just the same exact thing as using a remote batarang in the Batman Arkham games. It feels like a shitty-ass motion controls gimmick from 2006. Everything else is something you've seen in a previous game. In fact, I'd say every ability except the Psychic Blast I just mentioned and the Grapple Lasso is just a reskin from Prime 1. A returning mechanic from Metroid Prime 2 is ammo, where each of the elemental beam types shares an ammo that is separate from missiles. And this mechanic honestly barely ever comes up after the first few hours. The only time you're at risk of running out is when you unlock the elemental charge shots, which replace elemental super missiles, and these are acquired from the optional shrines in the sandbox. I was pretty disappointed by these. The ice one is especially useless, being like a weird spread shotgun shot. By comparison, the lightning charge shot is the most powerful attack in the game, shooting a rapid fire blast of lightning bolts that also chains damage between multiple enemies. But the thing is, you don't get this game's version of the wave beam until 3/4 of the way in, so you're fighting these bullet sponge robots that take 3 fully charged shots to kill, and you'll end up fighting 5 or 6 in a fight. There's a bunch of mandatory combat arenas, as if this game's trying to be Doom, when the combat isn't nearly as good. In this game, you only have, 3 or 4 combat options most of the time? And you're fighting the same, 5 or 6 enemy types, which I feel like I've complained about in every single modern game review, except for ones made by, From Software. Especially since they could have easily had space pirates teleport to this planet. I mean, they show up in the intro. Why the hell do they not just come up with a reason that you fight them in the main game? It would feel like such an easy solution. So the basic enemy variety is awful. Another really weird thing is that there's almost no Metroids in the Metroid game. Metroids show up in the intro, and I guess they're teleported to this other planet and fuse with all the bosses. They literally call it Metroid Fusion, so you better go buy that game. Much better game than this. You should just play Metroid Fusion. Or better yet, even play Metroid Dread, which I actually thought was a good game. Yes, I don't hate every modern game. Also loved Kirby, by the way. Go watch that video. Well, what about the boss fights? These are usually the highlights of games like this. I'll be generous and say it's a mixed bag. I noticed game reviewers were saying they're like Zelda bosses, where you use the new upgrade you just got to beat the boss. That is only half true. I'd say half the bosses you can kind of just beat them in a fairly normal fashion. At most, the gimmick will be you shoot this spot, and then you can shoot the real weak spot. And you'll notice many of the boss attack patterns are recycled from the old Prime trilogy as well. Like, there's the attack that you have to go into Morph Ball to dive under, or to Boost Ball past the enemy since it tracks further than you can dodge. Almost every single boss shoots a slow floating homing projectile that you can destroy to get health and resources back. Several of the bosses in this game have the same exact type of shockwave where they just slam the ground and you have to jump or sometimes double jump over it. There are some interesting exceptions, like one of the Sylux fights, you have to use your grapple beam to avoid the electrified floor, and I thought that was pretty cool, but I'd say most of the bosses are pretty uninspired. I'd say the issues with the bosses has less to do with any of them specifically and just the basic mechanics of the game. There's so many forms of stun in this, and I personally hate CC mechanics in FPS games. I find them disorienting and very frustrating. And specifically when I was fighting the Omega Griever boss at the end of the mines, I was drinking a bit, I'll admit, so being drunk doesn't help for this kind of stuff. But every single one of his attacks would interrupt me charging up a beam, and that was so fucking frustrating. Another incredibly annoying and common thing in this game is enemies can actively dodge your attacks. Yes, the Grievers just have a Dark Souls or Bloodborne dodge, and there's nothing you can do about this, because your projectiles fly so slow. The Omega Griever boss fight, as he's crawling the walls, just actively waits for you to shoot and then dodges, just to taunt you and waste your fucking time. It is unbelievable how unfun this is. Especially when, for some godforsaken reason, they decided to make the weak spots on a couple of the bosses incredibly tiny. Not to mention, said weak spot is always moving. The worst examples of this were the Lava Dragon boss, which just slowly sways its head from left to right, and yet I couldn't fucking hit the weak spots with the ice beam for the life of me. And a mini-boss near the end of the game that's guarding the last mech part. You can freeze this guy's little lava holes so he doesn't shoot projectiles at you, but he spins his head from left to right as he's shooting. And if you try to stand up close to him, you know, so you have a much better chance to freeze them, you just get hit with a million fire projectiles and lose a full health bar in a millisecond. It's stuff like this that made me fucking rage to the point I almost smashed my Joy-Cons. And speaking of Joy-Cons, yes, I decided to play this with the mouse controller method because I wanted to test out that feature for the Switch 2. And I will say, it is better than an analog stick, definitely. But the huge drawback is that you have to use these tiny-ass controllers made for toddler-sized hands. It is mind-boggling what the fuck Nintendo was thinking with this shit. And that's pretty much everything you need to know about the combat mechanics. This is the aspect of the game that was the most similar to previous games, and is also probably the least bad aspect of the game. It's just serviceable. But because of the inflated enemy health, including the boss health bars, which are absurdly long, they managed to make something even as simple as Prime's combat worse than previous games. Now let's move on to arguably the worst part of this entire game, the characters. Why the hell do they have these Galactic Federation nobodies? Samus is treated like a background character in her own game. Like, these characters are given their own backstories and character development and, like, Marvel movie moments. I mean, during the fucking mine dungeon, they do death fake outs for every single one of these characters and then don't even explain how they managed to survive. We're just supposed to believe they're badasses who could take on a whole horde of these Griever things, even though in gameplay, they get downed in like 5 seconds if you're not constantly covering them. Oh, and if you don't revive a partner in combat, that's a game over, buddy. How dare you not love our self-insert characters? Miles is definitely the worst one, and it was certainly a choice to make him the first companion you meet in the game, so you're immediately put off and don't want to play anymore. I honestly can't believe that Retro Studios thought it was okay that you have this annoying-ass, relatable soy boy bitch behind you being like, "Oi, Samus, I tripped. Make sure to save. Oh, I think if you use your morph ball, you can solve the puzzle." Holy shit, dude. The worst part is they artificially inflated this guy's importance for no reason. As I already covered earlier in the video, this guy is necessary to get the other elemental beams in the game, and he's also the one who repairs the golem mech so you can go challenge the final boss. Well, if you're sufficiently schizo enough, you might question why a guy with a giant nose, a dual citizenship with Israel, and is voiced by someone named David Goldstein, is portrayed in this game as your greatest ally. You cannot possibly complete your mission without him. But it's probably just a coincidence. The weirdest part is, while these annoying companions are constantly talking, never letting you absorb the atmosphere, sometimes they will ask Samus questions, and she just doesn't answer because all of a sudden she's a mute again. Obviously, Nintendo remembers the backlash to Other M, but the problem wasn't that Samus spoke. No one thinks Samus should be Link. No, the problem was what she said.
The baby, the baby, the baby. Adam, Adam, Adam. Adam, 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 Adam.
Everyone knows that. But for some reason, you know, in Nintendo and Retro Studios' mind, this translates to, no, Samus should never talk ever. This doesn't make her look like a stoic badass. It makes her look extremely autistic. And not the based kind. No, this is the cringe kind. The only one that's nearly as annoying as Miles is Armstrong, the woman of the group, who is a fangirl for Samus. And man, this shit just looks cringe as hell. It's so obvious that she's a self-insert for one of the writers who sees Samus as some kind of female empowerment character, when that has never been the case and never will be for that matter. I wish I had much else to say about the other characters, but they're not nearly as notable as Miles, and they're pretty much just all one-dimensional cliches. The only one that gets an elaborate backstory is the sniper, and even so, it's told so vaguely. He has some kind of religion that I don't think is ever expanded on in the Metroid lore, so really all it adds to the game is more unnecessary runtime and forcing you to watch even more cutscenes to get every upgrade in the game. And the sad thing is, I know on some level Retro Studios knew these characters were annoying, which is why each one of them was given like 10 unique lines for shooting them. This is mind-boggling to me, because I feel like in a better game, I would say this is a good thing that the characters actually react to you hitting them, which is becoming increasingly more rare in modern games. But on the other hand, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't stop them from ruining the immersion. In a way, it almost feels like the devs are taunting us all. And another aspect of this game that feels so incredibly cheap is the voice acting. This is something that I'm sure you've all noticed since Breath of the Wild. Nintendo does not give a single fuck when it comes to hiring English voice actors. I wish I could say it was just for the background characters, but the sniper guy especially just sounds like a random dude they picked up off the street.
I tried to access this terminal, but the only thing I could get operational was the gun. That's it. Then I see this here.
And the bad voice acting even applies to Samus, because although she doesn't speak a single line of dialogue, she does grunt and even scream when she takes damage. Samus in the old games didn't scream. She's supposed to be a stoic badass. In this one, she genuinely sounds like a girl getting the shit beat out of her. That said, Miles does have one single good line in this game right at the end. Miles is screaming. Oh man, and Sylux. We gotta fucking talk about Sylux. It is so clear to me that Retro Studios had no idea what they wanted to do with him. It's obvious that the contract writers that shouldn't have been anywhere near this game probably didn't even know who the hell he was. Hell, most of the people who are playing this game never played Prime Hunters. I did. And let me tell you, that's some of the worst controls I've ever experienced in any video game, but still pretty good for a DS FPS. And while he was certainly one of the cooler bounty hunter designs from that game, if it wasn't for the secret ending in Prime 3 where you see his ship, they genuinely could have just left him out of this game. Despite him being the main villain, he only has about 5 minutes of actual screen time, because those fights that take place over the course of the game are against just robots that he controls somehow. And then you just find him at the end of the game in a psychic healing pod, and he all of a sudden has superpowers, even though he's just been trapped in a fucking pod this whole time. He doesn't even really have a villain motivation except he hates Samus. You have to get 100% completion to see his backstory, and it's basically just he's an angry incel misogynist who blames Samus even though it was his fault his whole unit died and he wasn't able to secure the space pirate weapon, and he's just hated her ever since. That's literally it. 90% of the people who play this game are never even going to see this ending naturally, because getting 100% scans without a guide is just very unlikely, given there's so many that are easily missable. This story is just absolute fucking dog shit. It's clear that they just want to tell a really generic climate change bad story, but then realized that they had no fucking villain, so who the hell is the player supposed to fight? Oh yeah, there's that Sylux guy. He has nothing to do with the Lemorne, and the sad thing is, he has a pretty cool design, and they even gave him a good voice, probably the only good voice actor in the game, unless you count the robot, but he only has like 20 lines in the whole game or some shit. What a fucking waste. And the first part of the final boss fight is absolutely abysmal. He gets these giant penis tentacles, and that's absolutely what they are, by the way. Again, you know, more misandrous symbolism. The woman kills the wiener. In each phase of the boss, he gets more of these tentacles that you have to take out before you're allowed to hurt him. And you also have to keep all of your allies alive. Yeah, I know we all love the escort mission mechanic from the rest of the game, so let's make the final boss fight an escort mission. Genius! No one would ever complain about that. And I actually lost my first attempt completely out of my control, because in the third phase, he shoots giant lightning bolts all over the screen, and your allies are too stupid to dodge them. And if they get hit by lightning when they're already down, it instantly kills them and you get a game over. There was nothing I could do. The second phase of the boss fight is kind of cool, but way easier than some of the previous ones for some reason. I easily did it in one try. And then the game just kind of ends with all these Reddit retards dogpiling Sylux while Samus teleports off the planet by herself. She just leaves them to die. Oh, and if you don't press A in time, you actually get a game over, and it loads you back to the second part of the boss fight. I thought the writers wanted us to care about these characters. They're actually encouraging us to abandon them as soon as possible. Though I guess who knows, maybe they defeated Sylux. I mean, they were badass enough to kill an entire army of grievers by themselves. God, remember in the beginning of Metroid Prime 2 where all of the Galactic Federation soldiers are horribly killed by the Ing? Do you know how much better of a game this would be if we got to see our allies slowly die over the course of the game? But no, this is Marvel movie slop written by nepotism hire hacks who should be blacklisted from the game industry, but instead they are just casually allowed to ruin some of the biggest IPs in history with no consequences. In fact, in many cases they fail upwards somehow. But oh guys, don't harass the devs. Definitely do not hold anyone accountable for their very purposeful destructive actions. Since I'm just rambling about nothing, let's go to the conclusion. This game is fucking ass. It's clear that Retro Studios didn't even want to make this game. Let's be honest, they didn't. That's why instead of making an actual Metroid game, they made a linear dungeon crawler with a giant empty desert sandbox in the middle with nothing in it. Several mandatory backtracking sections where you don't even pick up new upgrades half the time. They added all these Galactic Federation self-insert characters that make the game vastly more annoying to play, but you know, I guess normies loved Atreus and Mimir and all these other annoying chatty bitches behind you, so clearly they'll love this, right? Samus feels like a background character in her own game. Sylux was brought back for virtually no reason, just to make people soy out, like this is fucking Star Wars. They didn't even do anything with him. And probably one of the more underrated sins that this game commits is it's just unambitious. It's not even slightly innovative. In fact, it doesn't even improve on the things that came before, because it just brings back almost every single mechanic from previous games. What does Prime 4 do new? Basically nothing. All of your abilities are just reskins of ones from previous games, and all the core combat mechanics are functionally the same. It's just the same game you've already played 3 times before, but significantly worse. The worst sin this game commits is that it's just boring. And that is the worst thing a video game can be, is boring. I've said it a million times. I honestly kind of wish this game was terrible, because then I could have maybe ironically enjoyed it, but I was just bored most of the time. I'm just glad this game will probably bomb, and it looks like any of the Nintendo fans with sense hate this game, as they should. And this time, let's just let the Prime series die and stay buried, and every single motherfucker working at Retro Studios should be blacklisted from the game industry. Shut down the studio. It's the people killing the games as much as it is the corporations. I'll probably make a Gaming is Dying video about that next year, because I'm so tired of Redditors and other leftists pretending that game devs didn't do nothing and they're all equally talented. There's no such thing as a bad chef, apparently. That's about it. See you next time, guys. Oh my god. Bye! 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 Goodbye! I don't care! You guys fucking suck. Eat shit and die. I hate all of you. You will not be remembered. Actually, we'll remember how much we hate you. That's it.